Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Boothcast. Today, our special guest is Mr. Ochs. He's a teacher, playwright, actor, and most importantly, the best man I know.
Ooh, look at that.
Mr. Ochs, how are you?
How did you get to be the best man I know? Will I be the best man at your wedding?
I mean,
If I'm the best man you know?
not always the best
Am I
man.
not supposed to ask questions?
You're supposed to do anything you want, mister.
Ask me something.
How was Miss Van Strien has commented to us that you grew up in the Bronx. How was growing up there, and how could you compare that culture?
How did she find out?
She knows a lot of things.
She knows a lot of things.
Inside information. How was it? What was your question?
How was it growing up in the Bronx compared to the culture you see here?
Most of you guys who have survived a course with me get enough biographical information to know that the Bronx is like my playground. And a very dangerous, crazy playground.
You think that helped you
Yes,
go into the person you
definitely.
weren't?
Well, first of all, it made me want to get out
More.
of the Bronx, right?
the Bronx.
You don't say, "Oh, this is great. I want to be in danger every day," right? Because in the 70s and 80s in the Bronx, it wasn't quite as cleaned up as New York City is now.
What kind of
Now it's a
danger?
police state. Well, muggings, gangs, robbings, violence.
Ever been mugged before?
Even racial violence at the end of the 70s, it got kind of heated because there was a thing called white flight, where all the white families were moving out. And this was a test for New York City. I had lived with every color imaginable. So I had every kind of friend, every color, every religion, and it was a nice community. Everybody looked after each other. That was kind of weird that somebody would lean their head out the window and scream your name, and it wasn't your mother, it was somebody else's. So it was a close-knit community, but kind of dangerous because I was, playing on the subway tracks and jumping across rooftops and things like that. So it was a great playground and a lot of learning happening. So, yeah, I think it helped form me a lot.
And that motivated you to get out of there in some way because of all the danger.
Well, the guys chasing me motivated me even more. I wasn't chased out of the Bronx, and I didn't really want to get out until I was 30 and realized, I wasn't going to be mayor of New York City or live in that beautiful apartment that I looked at and things like that. So I was a little bit upset that I didn't, conquer New York City. Gaffer. There's a pencil on the floor, Gaffer. So I think it inspired me in a lot of different ways. It played a lot of sports in the streets and stuff like that, lots of city-type games. So
Baseball?
as my formative years, now that you know the difference between formative and summative,
Oh, of course.
Well,
it was forming me, right? My formative years. I knew that I was going to go into higher education. I knew that I wanted to go to college. Just any college. Inspired, pushed, motivated, I'm not sure what it is, but I didn't want to just stay there.
That's
Right, I wanted to see the world.
and this
Bolivia.
and this push towards seeing the world. Where did it lead you first?
Brooklyn.
Big change.
You gotta start small,
Got on
right?
a subway, I'm going to see the world. 45 minutes later, I'm in Brooklyn. I was born in Manhattan, raised in the Bronx, and then I lived in Brooklyn just before I left for Chile.
Chile,
So first stop was South America.
South America.
Without ever seeing it, of course. Just arrived in the desert in Chile.
And how did you decide to come from Brooklyn to South America?
Want ads? What's a want ad? Actually, I saw the job that said all subjects, one classroom,
High pay.
all high school, meaning all high school grades in one classroom. High pay? It's a teaching job.
Doesn't go
How is that
together.
possible? It was decent. It was a decent pay because it was an international job and it was something that not anybody could do. Because I needed to do all subjects, yes, algebra, everything in one room with students from 6th to 12th grade. And I had done a few jobs like that. So I was kind of like,
Perfect for the job.
yeah, I had been training for it because I had a full class of emotionally disturbed students of the same ages. So I would just have to do something for education for everybody. So I was used to compartmentalizing and saying, you are doing geometry, you are doing English lit.
So
I wasn't a lit teacher yet. I was
Not
a
yet.
social studies teacher, actually.
When did you start to be impassioned, I guess would be the word, for English and literature and acting and drama?
Well, the acting and drama came years before any teaching. Teaching was a part-time job while I was an actor. And then I said, hey, you could make a living doing this and pay the rent and stuff. So the passion for acting probably came when I was like 7 or so. When I was running around the house singing Yellow Submarine, and I didn't know any of the words, just Yellow Submarine. Running around the house, and my sister taped it. And she's like, 25 years later, she's like, here's you at 7. And I was like, I was a little ham, wasn't I? So I didn't know back then, but I was, expressing.
You have to get that tape later.
Yeah. It's not quite the same as the Access Hollywood tape from the president. I didn't say anything bad. I just said, Yellow Submarine, Yellow Submarine, like 88 times. Didn't know any more words, just ran around the house singing that. So I guess I was putting on a show that day. I had no idea. But they are related.
Yeah, related.
Yeah.
Acting and
Where, most people say teachers like having a captive audience. In other words, you can't get out. But you guys always got out of my class whenever you wanted. It's escape.
it's kind of like a performance art. You're performing.
There
to the
is.
students.
There is. So I just had to kind of say, okay, now put some content in there.
Make them actually learn something.
Yeah.
For a change.
So before the interview started, right, all the good questions were answered, and one of them was about kind of fooling you into learning something. Instead of like, oh my God, open to page 17 today. Yeah, you're going to do this and this and this. So I might start with one of your questions.
Trick us into learning.
Precisely.
That
At least so that you don't feel that it's heavy and annoying, and it should be a little lighter, and then maybe you learn something.
Maybe.
When you hate it, you don't learn anything. I mean, I was good at math, but I hated it. Right? And I hated being in math class.
you told us
So
that.
can I just do the problems and go home? Right? And so I think it was my reaction to my own education, which was Catholic. So I'll show you the
We're
bruises.
gonna get controversial.
I'll show you the
We're
bruises.
going into religion.
The bruises and the broken bones. I was in a cast for 8 years. No. It was brutal.
So when
Yeah.
you were young, would you have wanted someone to teach you like you teach us, with a little bit of acting and
Exactly.
jokes?
I said, especially history. I said, I don't want to teach history. I don't think people should be teaching history like they did to me. And so I said, let me make it a little more interesting. Sometimes I dress up or something. Something to make it alive, rather than just look at this boring stuff.
Because it
And
really
I told you guys how they did it. We got mimeograph sheets, which were smelly, and it would be like 2 full pages of text. Imagine if you walked into a class and someone just drops 2 pages of text. Says,
Looking
there you
at
go.
have fun.
Read that. And you go, do I have to read it? Is this formative? You would ask to not read this, right? What can I do to not read this?
Anything.
And worse, we would look at it and it smelled funny. So everybody in the class would be going, sitting there smelling this very weird, kind of like smelling markers. Still got students
paper.
doing that, right?
like
Still
gasoline?
sniffing markers. But I remember saying nobody wanted to read that. It was not alive. There was nothing to it. There was like, who's this guy? Some old dead white guy? Who cares? So if I could bring it alive a little and say, where where you go apple picking in north of New York State, that was a battlefield of this and this and this and this. So I like to
Incorporate.
bring it alive and say it's important.
Because
without history, you make all those mistakes again, don't you?
It really is alive, isn't it? It
Yes.
still connects to what's
Like,
going on right
like when
now.
you're in my class and I say, open the book, what's happening? Not what happened, but when you open the book, she goes to the refrigerator. She's still going every time you open the book. Just like history, you open it up, it's still kind of happening, right? And if you don't believe in time, it might be happening, right? Another
Again.
dimension. Here we take the interview in another
What do you think
It's still
about
happening. I just finished the book with the seniors about time travel. So they imagine that all moments have already occurred except for the future, and you can go visit them. So visiting a moment was kind of what I was trying to do for
That's what
history students.
a good book is supposed to do, right?
Yes.
It's supposed to
Bring you
transport
somewhere.
you into the.
See, there's the step I missed from being, a crazy Bronx kid running around, getting in trouble.
Books?
It was, how did that happen? At one point, I got tired of street sports and started reading because it was a way out. At 16 or 15, you can't just say, I'm leaving the Bronx, I'm going to France, right? You can't just take off. So that's how I traveled. I saw other places and other things, and just by reading a lot.
It goes.
It didn't help my, neighborhood reputation, of course. I was the hermit. It was like, he doesn't play sports anymore. And, at 13 or 14, if girls aren't interested in you, you better find a hobby. So I started reading a lot, right?
And where would you get all your books? At school, or would you go to a public library?
I would steal them.
From public library?
This is on tape. No, actually,
Stealing is
I
bad.
worked. Yeah, don't do that at home. I worked in a library twice. I worked in public library as my part-time job during high school. Yes, part-time job during high school. Right? Imagine that, taking another 5 or 6 hours away from you every day.
That sounds.
Oh, I can't get all this work done. Get a job. So, I worked in a library. Awesome bookstores in Manhattan where you could just sit there and go through old books and say, wow, look at this.
Stay for hours and
Yep.
hours on end.
Yep, and then just go to a park and read it. So it was kind of nice. I hung out in libraries a lot too.
And
Nerd.
Was it seen as? I mean, I don't think it's seen anymore in this day and age, but back then in the Bronx especially, was it seen as something that, I don't know, kind of,
A dangerous, sketchy place?
yeah.
Yes. It had a reputation, mostly from movies. Fort Apache, the Bronx, where a guy gets thrown off the roof, based on a true story. Then there's a few other classic films where you've seen, pictures of what it was like, and there was gangs and things like that. The 50s definitely had gangs. By the 60s and 70s, it was just plain violence. Just crazy. There's a lot of tension, and the country wasn't in good shape in the 70s. There was an oil crisis and this crisis and inflation. So it was the Bronx and New York City kind of got a bad rap, that it was dirty and sleazy, and I loved it.
And
It was authentic. It wasn't, like,
No
"Ooh,
fake.
look, this is where MTV Studios is, right? There were theaters of varying degrees of content, and bookstores and record stores and
It was just in your face.
media, we used to call it. In other words, concerts and clubs and piano bars, and it was just like, I wouldn't suggest going to college there.
Too many distractions.
I knew that I wouldn't get anything done. So I said, I gotta go really far away from here.
Chile.
I ended up going, no, not for college.
Oh.
I went to college in upstate New York. Almost Canada. Way north in the snow, and I could read in a tree.
Really peaceful.
Yeah. I wanted that because I knew I wouldn't get anything done in New York City. Accepted to NYU and didn't go there. Not because of all the distractions, because of the price tag.
And have you been back to the Bronx ever since?
Oh yeah, they love me there. There's always a parade.
You knew everybody there while you were there.
Well, I don't know if I have any live friends still in the Bronx, and I have no family there. Everybody eventually moved out of the Bronx into New Jersey, more suburban, or into New York State, more out of the city. But yeah, I've been back a couple times. I even went back to the apartment I grew up in. And somebody had stolen all the copper pipes out of the floor.
Well,
In other words, they ripped up the wood floor to get the pipes and undo them because there was nothing. The building was abandoned, and that much copper is worth a lot of money. So I went back and saw my ravaged apartment where I grew up.
But
Kind of nice.
generally, like, the whole area, has it changed a lot?
Yeah, it's a lot more civil, and when I left, it was 54% Hispanic. People used to make fun of me because the bells would say, like, Menendez, Ocasio-Cortez, no, not her.
the other one.
Menendez, Dominguez, Gutierrez, Ochs. It was like, you fit in here? Well, I don't have a choice. Do I? But it's a lot more family oriented. So there's a lot of families, working class and middle class families in the Bronx. It's not just a haven of drugs and violence like it looked like in the 70s.
And when you went to Chile, did you know Spanish or anything, or any language, or was it?
Sure, you should hear some of the words I learned in Spanish in New York. I came to Chile with French.
French? Was it hard to connect
Didn't help
with
much in
students?
Chile. Anybody want to speak French with me? And my neighbor spoke French and no English. So we kind of traded, and I started adjusting my French to Spanish so I could communicate with her, and she got help from me in English.
And so, was it hard with the students to connect if you didn't know their language?
Yes and no, because I knew their language. They were mostly international students. So I had a little international classroom inside a host school.
Oh.
So it was mostly Americans, because they were mining companies, and so their students would be here for 2 or 3 years, like the diplomats' kids here. 2 or 3 year contract, and got to go back to an American school. So we need a certified American teacher to make sure I've done all my subjects and stuff. And they worked hard. There was one student who did a 1.5 years' work in less than an academic year.
Really?
So they would go back and be able to get into 11th grade because they finished everything from 10th grade at the right time. So ask me about language. I learned Spanish in about a year, and people were telling me I was fluent, and I was like, not really. Not really, but I can understand everything, and because I had a kind of theater ear, I could mimic people that I heard, so I could say all kinds of things I didn't understand too, which is dangerous. But most of my kids, everyone in my class and every subject was in English. So I just had to relate to the school outside and life in Spanish, but I had to. So I learned a language out of necessity, which is the best teacher.
It's the best
Better
way to
than
learn.
any language teacher, program, or app, or anything like that. Is go there and live there for 2 months.
And you
2
learn
months is enough.
everything.
Well, you're not going to become fluent unless you already had a base. But within a year living somewhere, you'll speak that language because you have to.
Survive.
Unless people don't want to exchange with you. And I had lots of people. I'd be drawing pictures and going, Esquina. Esquina. Oh, esquina. Oh, no, there's no S in Chile. Esquina. So I would learn how they were speaking. And then, of course, go to another country and nobody understands you. Chilean Spanish.
And something else about the from Chile you went all the way to Arabia Saudita, or
I don't know, what's that? You mean Saudi Arabia?
Saudi Arabia, precisely.
Yeah, I did, didn't I? I don't regret it, really, because I was very curious after 2001. Are they all terrorists? This can't be true, right? So I really wanted to know something about the region. And I wanted the opportunity to visit the Holy Land, right? And see Damascus, which I couldn't because it was at war within a year. And travel a little and see other things in the Middle East. And also, as if this was the fifth thing, money. In other words, there was a rather large paycheck to teach English in Saudi Arabia.
Nobody really wanted to go
go
there.
to Saudi.
No. In fact, they never held interviews inside the country. Because if you were there, you'd go,
No, thank you.
get me out of here.
Thank you,
Get
but
me out of here. So it was a little stressful being there in the very beginning, but learned a lot and then went to a neighboring country, which wasn't quite as oppressive.
Did you think that you think that you teach them a lot, like?
He didn't
Not
say
only-
teached, did he?
You
Okay,
taught
good.
them a lot.
No, you meant to say, and I teach them a lot, as in present tense or routine, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
About not only about English, but about like just being
Life. I wish I could, because when you're that obscenely rich, you really don't take advice from anybody else. So, and yes, I'm talking obscenely rich, like, students with their own 5 cars. Not their family has 5 cars. The 17-year-old student has 5 cars. So it was definitely a lot of culture shock, but I learned a lot about the culture and picked up a very little bit of the language because of its connection to Spanish. I could pick up Arabian stuff
because they used to be in that.
They used to be controlled by Spain for 700 years.
Thank you, Miss Hefty.
No, wait, the other way around. The Arabs were controlling Spain for 700 years. Yeah, so it did a lot for the language. Introduced a lot of words. So yeah, I think I managed to teach a lot, and not just what was my subject, because my subject was American history and it was right out of the book. So I had to teach them what was in the book, not what the Saudi government decided I should teach. It was an American diploma program, so I had to teach what was in the book.
But did they? So you had a lot of freedom to.
But then I also had to explain why it said that in the textbook that George Bush, the president at the time, had said that Saudi Arabia was the largest contributor to global terrorism. And I had to say, well, let's look at the facts. Right? And we did. And we kind of studied it rather than just like, oh, I can't believe they said that and off with his head and stuff. It wasn't quite as scary as Saudi Arabia can be, because they had an American curriculum, which was kind of interesting.
And most of the people there, what did they think of the United States? Had they been there?
Actually, Saudi Arabia, very good relations with the United States since 1932 when they found the oil. Seriously. So there had been a long relationship and lots of Americans there. Kind of funny, because when I went to Oman next door, which was a British protectorate, a lot more British people and not as many Americans. I like working with the Americans more.
Why?
They have a sense of humor.
Seriously.
Seriously, I think I have a sense of humor, and then when I get in a group of American teachers, it's like, wow, these guys don't take anything seriously, do they? Which is much more fun than the British paperwork-oriented, rigid. You know, they didn't have quite the sense of humor that the Americans did. You have to if you're in Saudi Arabia.
Yes,
you have to kind of like take everything a little lightly.
And what caused you to move from Saudi Arabia to
Beach.
Beach?
the beach?
Well, there is some beach on the Gulf in Saudi Arabia, but it's very limited, and you surely wouldn't see any females on that beach because they're not allowed to be there. So it wasn't just, I needed a beach party, but Oman was a slightly more liberal country where I knew I wouldn't feel so oppressed. Like, people telling me I should convert to Islam and that I'd be such a good Muslim.
Was that something that happened daily?
You felt it daily. You felt like you were an outsider constantly. But Oman was a little more liberal and a little easier to travel and get around and stuff, and more open in every sense of the word. It was like Muslim light.
And after you went from Oman, you came all the way back to
I just
Bolivia.
spun the globe and went, Bolivia.
Why not?
I just wanted to get back to South America. So landed in Santa Cruz.
And
Oh no.
which one?
Don't ask any Santa Cruz questions.
Santa Cruz.
This might get around.
And in Santa Cruz, like when you compare from here to Santa Cruz,
Go for it. More coffee.
is there any two differences that are gigantic when it comes to culturally or with the students, or are they?
You mean between these two cities?
Yeah, between La Paz and Santa Cruz.
Okay, rewind the tape. Yeah, there's definitely differences. It's obviously a little more rural down there, so the attitudes are different towards the government, towards education, toward status. The whole society seems to be different. The community is quite different from La Paz. I think La Paz is a little more international, a little more open, a little more accepting of other cultures and other people and other languages, and within Bolivia, more accepting of other cultures. Whereas in Santa Cruz seems a little more insular, a little more isolated, and not really worried about the rest of the world. As long as Santa Cruz is okay.
And
But that's just general, not students.
It's just
No,
the
I think-
culture in the city as.
I think the
as
students are pretty much the same, but this school has maybe higher expectations
There or here?
here. But they're expecting you to be a little more respectful, so most of you are.
most.
They don't know who's in the corner, right?
No.
Okay.
Thank God.
What else you got?
Well, and when you started your drama class, was that some kind of passion project or something
that was an epiphany. It
epiphany?
was amazing to say, oh, wow, now I can do something I love to do as part of my job. I love teaching as well, and I love teaching lit more than just plain teaching, but
Love.
drama is my first love. So before I did any teaching, I did loads of drama. So it's kind of like saying, I told most of the students, I said, I'm not even your teacher, I'm a director now, which makes me more responsible for this production and less of your buddy. Because we got to get this done, all of us. And I was really happy with the results, and here we are sitting on the Ochs, pre-memorial little theater, not an auditorium because they built a library on top of it. It was an auditorium. You can tell from the construction. This, cheap foamy ceiling is just laid in underneath the concrete floor for the library, taking the entire auditorium away.
And how would you, as a director, how do you deal with
Director's hat.
actors that are like prima donnas? Those that want to like change the script all the
I haven't
time.
met too many of them here yet because they don't have the experience to say, well, and be overly dramatic. But there was a few. There were a few who were like slipping into that diva mode. There was one actor who will remain nameless,
Good.
although you can probably see his face on this very same newspaper. But he was like, oh, you don't understand. I have all these problems. And I'm under so much pressure. And I said, well, forget that. That's why you're up there. You're up there to forget your problems and present other problems to the audience. So I think, there was a few kind of tried to slip into diva mode, but
Got stopped immediately.
not being the friendly, your buddy teacher meant I could snap him out of that pretty fast. And it was good because he did very well.
Man.
Once he got out of the diva thing and said, okay, just throw yourself into this and see what happens. And he did, and it showed. So, I don't know. I hope I don't have too many other prima donnas in my life, but they're easy to deal with.
Were you a prima donna?
I knew that was coming. No, I was so young and open, just tell me what to do. I was just done. And, on the job training, lots of just do it and see what happens. Which, is my approach to the theater now. Just get up there, see what we got. Should I plug? We're doing the Bacchae, Greek tragedy, a big stretch.
When is it coming out?
Let's see, it'll be in theaters and when's it coming out? Last day of April, first day of May. Probably. I think that's the Friday, Saturday. 2 performances.
2 performances back to back.
Buy tickets now.
Buy tickets now.
Only on the Cougar Press.
Only on the coup. And
Cash only.
And with that, our time is up.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Ochs, for joining us.
I'm
Thank you, the
thrilled to be
audience,
here.
for joining us too. Don't forget to catch the play at the
Little theater.
At the Little Theater
At the
Here.
Robert Oaks
Memorial.
Right here.